The silence of a funeral is different from any other silence in the world. It isn't empty. It's heavy, dense, loaded with everything that wasn't said in time. I was standing there, in the center of that hall that smelled of chrysanthemums and incense, feeling the weight of every gaze upon me, while tears streamed down without my being able to control them. My mother was there, inside that dark wooden box, with a serene face and the pink lipstick she loved so much, the one she applied every morning, even on days when she could barely get out of bed. And I, her daughter, was falling apart inside, trying to understand how someone so strong could have departed so quietly, taking with her so many secrets I never imagined existed. Before I tell you the rest of this story, I need to ask you something. If you've ever felt that pain that squeezes your chest and won't leave, that feeling that you're screaming but nobody hears, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because I want you to know that you're not alone. I want this story to reach those who need to hear that it's possible to survive the worst kind of pain, the kind that comes from people who were supposed to protect us. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why this was the most important day of my life, even though it was the most painful. The sound of the Buddhist temple bells echoed low, almost timid, as if even the wind was afraid of disturbing death. I tried to keep myself upright, with my spine straight as my mother had always taught me, but my whole body trembled. My legs felt like wet cotton, and I had to make a conscious effort not to collapse right there on the cold marble floor. Around me, dozens of people dressed in black whispered condolences that I could barely hear. Everything seemed to be happening underwater. Muffled sounds, slow movements, reality distorted by the thick layer of grief. That's when he approached. The man my mother had chosen to love after my father passed. The man who entered our lives when I was only 12 years old, bringing gifts and wide smiles, promising to take care of both of us as if we were the most precious things in the world. The man I eventually began calling Appa, father, in Korean, even though I never really felt that he was. There was always a distance there, something I couldn't name at the time, but which now, looking back, I recognize as instinct, warning me that something was wrong. He positioned himself beside me, so close I could smell the expensive cologne he always wore, that aroma of wood and spices that my mother said made her feel safe. But in that moment, that smell nauseated me. He placed his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that should have been comforting, but which actually made me want to shrink away, to disappear. And then he whispered, through clenched teeth, maintaining an artificial smile for those watching from afar, "Stop crying. You're embarrassing me." The world stopped. I swear I felt my heart literally skip a beat. I looked at him, incredulous, searching for some sign that I had heard wrong, that those words couldn't have come from the mouth of a man who had just lost his wife. But his eyes were fixed on the guests, calculating every movement, every expression, concerned only with the performance he was staging. The tears streaming down his face seemed as fake as the plastic flowers decorating some of the funeral arrangements. I wanted to scream. God, how I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn to all those people and say that this man was a fraud, that behind that mask of a dedicated husband existed someone I had never really known. But my voice got stuck in my throat, along with all the years of upbringing that taught me to always be polite, always well-behaved, always the perfect daughter who didn't cause problems. The people around lowered their gazes, embarrassed by my emotion, and I felt small, pathetic, as if it were wrong to cry for my own mother. Something inside me, however, whispered to wait. A small, distant voice, which was perhaps my intuition, or perhaps my mother's spirit still hovering there, telling me that there was more to this story, that the truth was about to emerge, like air bubbles rising to the surface of deep waters. The ceremony dragged on for another 2 hours. I stood there, mechanically greeting people I barely knew, accepting hugs from distant relatives who appeared only on occasions like this, hearing empty condolences that slipped through my ears without leaving a trace. My body was present, but my mind wandered through memories. Mom making pancakes for breakfast on Sunday mornings, singing softly while folding clothes, laughing in that way that lit up the entire room. How could someone so vibrant simply disappear? After most of the guests had already left, when the hall was almost empty and the sun was beginning to set outside, painting everything orange and purple, one of the nuns from the temple approached me. She was an elderly woman, with a face marked by wrinkles that seemed to tell 1,000 stories, and kind eyes that looked at me with a compassion that made me want to collapse again. "Your mother asked me to give you this," she said, extending a small white envelope. "She said it was very important, that you should only read it when you were alone." My hands trembled as I took the envelope. It was sealed with red wax, in the old-fashioned way, and had my name written in my mother's delicate handwriting, that beautiful, careful lettering she used for birthday cards and shopping lists. Below my name, a single phrase, "For my daughter, when I can no longer hold you." My heart didn't just stop, it shattered. I felt my legs weaken and needed to lean on the nearest bench. The nun placed a gentle hand on my arm before walking away, leaving me alone with that piece of paper that seemed to weigh as much as the entire world. I sat there, on that dark wooden bench in the corner of the hall, where the candlelight flickered softly and the smell of incense was strongest. Outside, I could hear the muffled sound of Seoul, cars passing, people talking, life continuing as if nothing had happened, as if my world hadn't just crumbled. I held the envelope against my chest for a few minutes, trying to gather courage. Part of me didn't want to open it, didn't want to read my mother's last words, because that would make everything more real, more definitive, more final, but I needed to. So, with trembling hands and irregular breathing, I broke the wax seal and took out the sheets of paper from inside. There were 3 pages written by hand, each letter formed with care, some words smudged, perhaps by tears, perhaps by haste. I would never know. I took a deep breath, letting the familiar smell of her perfume, which still permeated the paper, envelop me one last time, and then I began to read. My daughter, my light, my heart that walks outside my chest. If you're reading this, it's because time was faster than I was. It's because I had no more days to hold you, to comb your hair as I did when you were little, to hear your stories about school and work. But before departing, before saying goodbye to this world that was sometimes cruel and sometimes wonderful, I need to tell you something I've hidden for a very, very long time. I closed my eyes, feeling the first tears burn before falling. The sound of people talking outside the temple seemed to come from another universe, distant and irrelevant. I was submerged in another world now, the world of my mother's final confessions. The man who is by your side at this moment, the man you learned to call father even though he didn't carry that title in his blood, is not who you think he is. And I know this revelation will hurt you, will make you question everything we've lived through in recent years. But I'd rather you feel this pain now, with the truth, than continue living in the illusion I helped construct. My stomach turned. I knew, deep down I always knew, that something was wrong. But reading that, seeing the words written by my own mother's hand, was different from any vague suspicion I might have had. I loved him, daughter. I need you to know that. When he appeared in our lives, right after your father passed, he was everything I thought we needed. He was kind, attentive, made me feel that I wasn't alone in this huge and frightening world. You were so small, so scared, and he seemed to bring light back to our dark house. So I allowed him to enter. I opened my heart and our home to him, believing that I had finally found someone who would truly love us. I could imagine my mother writing this, perhaps sitting at the kitchen table late at night, when the illness was already consuming her, but she still had the strength to hold the pen. I imagined the tears falling as she formed each letter, each confession. But his love, daughter, his love was never whole, never entirely ours. I discovered this 3 years after we married. It was on an ordinary day, a Thursday afternoon, when I was supposed to be at the hospital doing my routine exams, but the doctor canceled and I returned home earlier. I found his car parked in front of a cafe in the neighboring district, the one near the park where you used to play. Something made me stop, perhaps intuition, perhaps just the sensitivity we develop when we love someone and begin to realize that things aren't as they should be. My breathing was irregular now, my chest rising and falling too quickly. I needed to stop reading, needed to process, but I couldn't take my eyes off those words. I went into the cafe, and there he was, sitting at a table in the corner, holding hands with a woman who couldn't have been more than 25 years old. She was laughing in that way I used to laugh with him at the beginning, with shining eyes, completely enchanted. And then I saw when he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a casual kiss, daughter. It was the kind of kiss that leaves no doubt about what exists between two people. I could no longer hold back the tears. They fell heavily, wetting the paper, smudging some words. My hands shook so much I could barely hold the sheets. I didn't make a scene. I didn't shout, didn't cry in front of them, didn't overturn the table as my heart wanted me to. I left there in silence and went straight home, where I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I had no more tears. When he arrived that night, hours later, with his easy smile and some excuse about having meetings all day, I confronted him. I showed him that I knew, said I had seen. I could hardly believe it. My mother, always so strong, always so dignified, had carried this weight alone all these years, and I, completely oblivious, had continued treating that man with respect, calling him father, believing in the farce he performed daily in our home. You know what he said, daughter? He didn't deny it, didn't really apologize. He just looked at me with those eyes I had learned to trust and said, "Please don't tell her. The girl is too fragile to know. Our home wouldn't survive the truth." And like a fool, because love sometimes turns us into fools, I believed him. I believed I was protecting you by keeping this secret. I believed that maintaining the family unit, even if broken inside, was better than exposing you to the pain of betrayal. The letters began to blur completely under my tears. I had to stop, wipe my eyes, breathe deeply several times before I could continue reading. Outside, the sky was already completely dark. Someone had lit more candles at the altar, and the shadows danced on the walls like ghosts witnessing my pain. He promised to end it with her, promised he would be better, that he loved me, that it had been just a momentary mistake. And I, God forgive me, I wanted to believe it so much that I forced my heart to accept these lies. We continued living together, sleeping in the same bed, pretending we were a happy family. But something in me died that day, daughter. A part of my light went out and never shone with the same intensity again. I could see now, looking back with this new information, how my mother had changed over the years, how her smile had become weaker, more forced, how she began to distance herself from friends, to refuse invitations, to close herself more and more within herself. I had attributed all of this to the illness, to the aggressive treatments, to the physical pain she endured. But now I understood it was also emotional pain, the pain of living a lie, of sacrificing herself in silence, of dying a little each day while maintaining a mask of normalcy to protect me. 2 years after that day, I began to feel the symptoms, the pains, the fatigue, the body that no longer responded as before. And when the diagnosis came, when the doctor said the condition was delicate, that I would have to fight hard to stay here, part of me felt almost relief, as if I finally had an excuse to be tired, to no longer be able to pretend that everything was fine. I had never thought about this, never considered that my mother's illness might have some connection to the emotional suffering she carried. But now, reading her words, I understood. The body keeps the pains that the mind tries to hide. The body screams when the mouth remains silent for too long. He didn't end it with her, daughter. I discovered this a few months before my condition worsened. I saw messages on his phone, conversations about meetings, about having to be patient because the situation at home was delicate. He was using my health condition as an excuse to justify why he couldn't be with her all the time, as if I were a temporary obstacle to be worked around until I was no longer here. My breathing stopped completely. Anger began to rise, slow and hot, pulsing in every cell of my body. How could someone be so cruel, so completely devoid of humanity? He was literally waiting for my mother to pass so he could move forward with his mistress, while pretending to be the dedicated husband in front of everyone. And still, daughter, I remained silent, because at that point, I was so weak, so tired of fighting, that I no longer had the strength to confront the truth, and because I still wanted to protect you. You were trying to build your life, focused on work, on your dreams, and I didn't want to place this weight on your shoulders. I thought it would be my secret to take with me, my cross to carry alone until the end. But it wasn't fair. None of this was fair. My mother shouldn't have carried this weight alone. I should have noticed, should have asked the right questions, should have looked beyond the surface and seen the pain she hid so well. But now, my dear daughter, now that I know my days are numbered, that I won't have many other opportunities to hold you and tell you how much I love you. I can no longer maintain this silence. I can't leave this world leaving you in the hands of a man who doesn't deserve your trust, your respect, or your consideration. You deserve the truth, even if it hurts, because the truth, however sharp it may be, is also what sets us free. I was sobbing now, the sound echoing in the empty hall. I didn't care anymore if anyone heard me, if anyone was judging my emotion. All that mattered were those words, that final confession from my mother. I need you to know that none of this was your fault. You weren't too fragile to know the truth. That was just his excuse to continue with his lies. You were always strong, stronger than he ever gave you credit for, stronger even than I sometimes realized. And it's because of that strength that I know you'll be able to overcome this. You'll be able to free yourself from him and everything he represents. I read and reread that paragraph 3 times. My mother believed in me. Even in her final moments, when she was weakest and sickest, she believed I was strong enough to handle the truth, to rise after the pain. The truth hurts, my daughter. It hurts like an open wound that burns when touched. But it also heals, because you can't begin to heal while living a lie. You can't free yourself from chains you don't know you're wearing. And I refuse to leave this world leaving you chained to the illusion I helped construct. The last lines of the letter were written in a more trembling hand, as if my mother was already very weak when she reached the end. Free yourself from him, daughter. Free yourself from the shame that isn't yours, from the pain he caused, from the lie we lived. Live your life with truth in the light of day, and when you miss me, when the weight of absence becomes too much, remember that I was always on your side, even when it seemed I was on his. Each of my silences was an attempt to protect you. Each forced smile was so you could keep yours. I love you more than life, more than any words can express. And wherever I am now, I'll be rooting for you, proud of the incredible woman you've become. Don't let pain define you. Let truth strengthen you, with all the love a mother can carry, and which never dies, even when the body departs. I don't know how long I sat there, holding those pages, reading and rereading each word. The hall was completely empty now, just me and the heavy silence, and the ghostly presence of my mother that seemed to hover around me like incense smoke. I took a deep breath. I felt the ground disappear from under my feet, and at the same time felt something new being born inside me, a righteous anger, an indignation that had every right to exist. My mother lived in silence, falling ill quietly, dying a little each day while he continued living his lie, playing the role of dedicated husband for the audience, while destroying her heart backstage. The anger began to rise, slow but steady, hot and pulsing in my chest. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't try to suppress it, didn't try to be the polite, well-behaved daughter who doesn't cause problems. Because my mother was right. I couldn't free myself while living a lie. And that man, that imposter who pretended to cry at the funeral, while probably already planning when he could finally publicly assume his mistress, needed to be unmasked. I stood up slowly, folding the letter carefully and putting it back in the envelope. My legs still trembled, but there was a new firmness there, a determination that came from a deep place. I walked to the door of the hall, where I could still hear voices. Some people still hadn't left, including him. I pushed the door and entered the main hall, where about 20 people were still chatting in small groups, drinking tea and eating snacks, as is customary after Korean funerals. He was there, in the center of a group, speaking with that soft, controlled voice he always used in public, probably telling stories about how well he took care of my mother during her illness, how dedicated he was until the end. The blood boiled in my veins. I walked straight to the center of the hall, and my presence must have carried some different energy, because the conversations stopped one by one, people turning to look. He saw me approaching, and his face assumed that expression of rehearsed concern. "Dear, you should be resting. It's been such a difficult day for you." "Shut up." My voice came out louder and firmer than I expected. The silence in the hall became absolute. You could hear the sound of clocks on the wall, the creak of wood under someone's feet, the collective breath held. He blinked, surprised, trying to maintain composure. "What is it? What happened?" I raised the white envelope. This happened. The truth happened. I saw the blood drain from his face. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing everything he had built with his lies. This is a letter my mother wrote to me before she passed. A letter where she tells everything she lived through in silence all these years. And I think everyone here, everyone who came to pay their respects to a woman who suffered so much, deserves to know the truth about the man who's pretending to be in mourning. Wait, you don't need to do this now. We can talk in private. He took a step toward me, his voice low, almost pleading. No. I stepped back. Enough private conversations. Enough silence. Enough protecting your image while her memory is tainted by the suffering you caused. The people around began to murmur, curious, shocked, not knowing exactly what was happening, but feeling that something important was about to be revealed. I opened the letter again, even with trembling hands, and began to read aloud. I read about how my mother found him with another woman. I read about the broken promises, about how he used her illness as an excuse for his absences. I read about the silent pain she carried, about how she died a little each day while he continued living his lie. Each word that came out of my mouth was like a stone falling into still waters, creating waves that expanded through the hall. I saw faces change from confusion to shock, from shock to indignation. I saw women bring their hands to their mouths, men clench their fists, everyone processing the revelation that the dedicated husband was just another well-rehearsed liar. He tried to interrupt several times, stammering empty apologies, weak denials. This is a misunderstanding. She was confused because of the treatment. Things weren't quite like that. No, my voice cut through his excuses like a blade. Don't try to rewrite the story now. Don't try to diminish her pain. Don't try to make it seem like she was confused or delirious. My mother was completely lucid when she wrote this. Every word here is truth, and the fact that you're trying to deny it now, in front of everyone, only proves that you're exactly what she said you were, a liar who cares more about his reputation than the pain he caused. The murmur took over the hall. Some people were already starting to get up to leave, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. Others remained, perhaps out of morbid curiosity, perhaps because they wanted to witness justice being done, even if late. And now everyone knows, I continued, feeling each word as a liberation, as if I were tearing off chains I didn't know I was carrying. Who should really feel shame isn't me for crying for my mother. It's you, for betraying her, for lying to her, for using her illness as an excuse for your betrayals, for making her an accomplice to her own pain by convincing her she was protecting me with silence. I could see his mask shattering into pieces. The man who had always presented himself as dignified, respectable, dedicated, was there exposed as he really was. Small, cowardly, pathetic. He tried to say something more, but his voice failed. The tears streaming down his face now seemed genuine for the first time. Not of sadness for the loss, but of shame for having been discovered. One of the older women, a friend of my mother's I had known since childhood, approached him and said, with a coldness that cut, "You should be ashamed. We all knew something was wrong, but we trusted your act. Hong-suk deserved much better than you." One by one, people began to leave the hall, some greeting me with looks of solidarity, others simply avoiding looking at him. In less than 15 minutes, the hall was empty, except for the two of us. He stared at me, and for a moment I thought he would really apologize, that he would assume his guilt. But no. Instead, he said, "You just destroyed my reputation. I hope you're satisfied." I almost laughed. Your reputation? I didn't destroy anything you hadn't already destroyed with your choices. I just revealed what you were hiding. And yes, I'm satisfied, because for the first time since my mother passed, I feel I did something right, something she needed done, but didn't have the strength to do. She wouldn't have wanted this. She forgave me. She forgave you, so she could live in peace in the house where you betrayed her. She forgave you because she was too tired to fight, but that doesn't mean you deserve forgiveness. And it definitely doesn't mean I have to continue the lie you two built. He grabbed his coat and turned to leave, but before reaching the door, I said one more thing. You can leave now. You can go back to that woman who was waiting for you to finish pretending to mourn. But remember one thing. You'll live the rest of your life knowing that my mother was worth 1,000 times more than you'll ever be worth, and that despite all the pain you caused, She still found strength to protect me from the truth until the right moment. That's real love, something you clearly never understood. He left without saying anything more, and I stood there alone in the empty hall, with the smell of chrysanthemums still permeating the air. For the first time in that terrible day, I felt a strange peace. It was as if my mother were there, by my side, holding my hand, saying she was proud. That night, I went home alone. The rain began to fall when I left the temple, fine and persistent, wetting the streets of Seoul and reflecting the red lights of traffic signals like open wounds in the darkness. I walked slowly, deliberately, letting each drop wash away a little of the anger, a little of the sadness, a little of the weight I had carried for years without even knowing. The streets were relatively empty for a nighttime hour in Seoul. Only a few cars passed, their tires making that characteristic sound on the wet pavement, and some people ran with umbrellas, trying to protect themselves from the rain I chose to embrace. I didn't care about being wet. I didn't care that my funeral dress, that black dress my mother had helped me choose months ago, was soaked and heavy. Everything seemed symbolic somehow, as if the rain were washing not only my body, but also my soul. When I arrived at the apartment, that small but cozy space my mother and I had shared for so many years before he entered our lives, I felt a tightness in my chest. The door was exactly as I had left it that morning, but everything seemed different now. I unlocked it with still slightly trembling hands, entered and closed the door behind me, standing in the dark for a few moments. The apartment was silent, but it was a different silence from the temple's silence. Here, my mother's absence was palpable, not in a suffocating way, but in a familiar way, like an old friend you know you won't see anymore. I turned on the light and looked around. Everything still smelled like her, that soft perfume of white flowers she used, the smell of tea that always lingered in the air because she made at least 5 cups a day, the smell of old paper from the books she collected. I went to the kitchen and prepared a cup of tea, the same way I had seen my mother do thousands of times. Each movement was a memory: getting the kettle, filling it with water, lighting the stove, waiting for the water to boil, choosing the herb blend, pouring the hot water over the leaves, waiting exactly 3 minutes. It was almost meditative, and I needed that calm after the emotional storm of the day. With the warm cup in my hands, I went to the living room and sat on the floor, leaning against the sofa where my mother used to sit to read. I took the letter out of the envelope once more and read it again, this time without tears clouding my vision, this time managing to absorb each word with more clarity. And it was there, in that moment of quietude, that I finally cried for real. Not from anger, not from shock, but from a deep and clean pain. I cried for the girl who lost her father too early. I cried for the teenager who trusted someone who didn't deserve trust. I cried for my mother, who suffered in silence to protect me, who carried a weight that shouldn't have been hers. I cried for the family I thought we had, for the illusion we lived, for all the dinners where we sat at the table pretending to be happy. But I also cried with relief at finally knowing the truth, relief at no longer living a lie, relief at having found courage to expose what needed to be exposed. And strangely, I cried with gratitude that my mother had loved me enough to give me the truth in the end, to trust that I would be strong enough to handle it. In the following days, silence was my only companion. I took a few days off work, saying only that I needed time to process the grief. My colleagues were understanding, sent flowers and kind messages that I could barely respond to. I woke up to the distant sound of trains passing on the tracks near the apartment, that rhythmic and constant sound that somehow comforted me. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table where my mother and I had breakfast together every morning, and watched the city through the window. Seoul continued moving as always, millions of people coming and going, each carrying their own stories, their own pains, their own secrets. From my apartment on the 6th floor, I could see a piece of the Han River in the distance, that strip of water that cut the city in half, and I wondered how many other people were looking at that same water at that exact moment, also trying to understand their own broken lives. The pain was great, undeniable. Some mornings I woke up and for a brief second forgot that my mother had passed, that life as I knew it had ended. And then the memory would return like a wave, pushing me back down, reminding me that I was alone now in a way I had never been before. But there was something new there too, growing slowly like a seed that was planted in concrete and finds a way to crack the hard surface and reach the light. It was a strength I didn't know I had, a certainty that I had done the right thing, even though it hurt. An understanding that staying silent to protect liars wasn't protection. It was just another form of violence, this time against myself. Some people called me in the days after the funeral. Distant aunts, my mother's friends, even some neighbors who had heard about what happened. Some called to offer support, saying I had been brave, that my mother would be proud. Others called to subtly reprimand me, saying it had been inappropriate to expose family matters in public, that I should have kept that conversation for a more appropriate time. To the latter, I simply replied, "My mother lived in silence too long. I refused to do the same," and hung up. I also received a message from him 5 days after the funeral, a long message full of justifications and empty apologies. He said he had loved my mother, that he had made mistakes, yes, but that everyone makes mistakes, that I had been too harsh, that I had destroyed any chance of us maintaining a family relationship. I read the message 3 times, looking for some sign of genuine regret, of real responsibility for what he had done. I found none. It was just more of the same, trying to rewrite the narrative, trying to make himself the victim, trying to make me feel guilty for exposing his lies. I deleted the message without responding. He didn't deserve my words, didn't even deserve my anger. All he deserved was exactly what he had gotten: the truth being exposed, the mask falling, and the loneliness that comes when people finally see who you really are. A month later, I finally felt ready to really go out, not just to buy food or go to the pharmacy, but to really experience life again. I decided to visit the Han River, that place my mother and I used to go together on Sundays, when I was younger. She liked to walk along the shore, watch the boats pass, sit on a bench and simply exist for a while. The cold November wind cut my face as I walked along the bike path by the river. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of snow that hadn't yet fallen, and the waters reflected that gray back, creating an almost monochromatic world. There were few people around. It was a weekday morning, and only retirees and some dedicated runners braved the cold. I found an empty bench, the same one my mother and I always chose because it was under a large tree that in summer offered shade, and in autumn dropped golden leaves. Now, at the beginning of winter, the tree was bare, its branches extended to the sky like hands pleading for something. I sat down and watched the water. A tourist boat passed slowly, and I could vaguely hear the guide's voice through the speaker, telling stories about the city I already knew by heart, but which tourists heard with fascination. I thought about how many layers Seoul had. The city tourists saw, all bright lights and K-pop and street food, and the city that really existed, full of stories like mine, of pain hidden behind polite smiles, of families that seemed perfect on the outside, but were falling apart inside. "Mom," I whispered, my voice carried by the cold wind. "I read your letter, and I understood. I understood why you remained silent. I understood that you thought you were protecting me, but I also understood that silence can be as destructive as truth is painful." I closed my eyes, feeling the tears burn before falling, immediately cooled by the wind. "You taught me so much, even without knowing. You taught me that true love sometimes means making difficult choices. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain, but feeling the pain and moving forward anyway. You taught me that truth, however sharp it may be, is always better than the most comfortable lie." I opened my eyes and looked at the river again. A group of ducks swam near the shore, completely indifferent to the cold, to my presence, to the weight of human emotions. There was something comforting in that indifference of nature. The world kept spinning, rivers kept flowing, birds kept flying, regardless of our individual pain. "I promise you," I continued, "that I won't waste this gift you gave me, the truth, the freedom, the chance to live without carrying lies that aren't mine. I'll live in a way that would make you proud. I'll be honest, even when it hurts. I'll speak my truth, even when my voice shakes. I'll choose myself, always, because you showed me what happens when we don't." For the first time since the funeral, I felt a lightness in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was too early for happiness, but it was something like peace. It was the feeling of being on the right path, even if the path was difficult, even if I still had a long journey ahead. I realized there, sitting on that bench, watching the river I had seen 1,000 times but which now seemed different, that pain didn't destroy me. It woke me up. It woke me from a life I was living on autopilot, accepting things I shouldn't accept, staying silent when I should speak, allowing others to define my reality. From that day on, I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would never again allow anyone to silence me, that I would never again carry shame that wasn't mine, that I would never again pretend everything was fine when it wasn't, that I would never again protect liars in the name of keeping the peace. The months that followed were of reconstruction. It wasn't easy. Some mornings I woke up, and the pain was as physical as a stab wound, so real that I doubled over on the bedroom floor. But I learned to breathe through the pain. I learned that feelings aren't permanent, that waves come, but also go, that the worst moment always passes eventually. I started therapy, something I had never considered before, but which I now realized was essential. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Kim, helped me understand that what my mother had done, keeping secrets to protect me, came from a place of love, even if it hadn't been the right choice. She helped me understand that I could be grateful for her love, and at the same time recognize that the silence had caused damage. Love and pain can coexist, she told me in a session. You can love your mother deeply, and at the same time be angry with her for keeping secrets. These things aren't mutually exclusive. It was liberating to hear that. Because I was angry with my mother? Yes. Angry that she had suffered alone. Angry that she had underestimated my strength. Angry that she had let that man continue pretending to be part of our family when he didn't deserve to be there. But that didn't diminish my love for her. Didn't erase all the good memories, all the times she made me laugh, all the moments when she was the perfect mother in all the ways that mattered. I returned to work after a month, and it was strange trying to resume normalcy when nothing seemed normal. My colleagues were kind but awkward, not knowing quite how to act around someone who was clearly grieving. Some avoided the subject completely, as if my mother had never existed. Others talked too much, asking invasive questions about how I was dealing with everything. But I learned to navigate those moments. I learned to set boundaries, to say, I don't want to talk about it, when I didn't want to talk, and to share when I felt comfortable. I learned that people generally have good intentions, even when they say the wrong things, and that I didn't need to make other people comfortable with my grief. 3 months after the funeral, I was organizing my mother's things, a task I had postponed because it seemed too final, too definitive. I was going through her dresser, deciding what to keep and what to donate, when I found a shoebox full of old letters. Letters my father had written to her when they were young, before they married. Letters she had kept all these years, even after he passed, even after she remarried. I sat on the bedroom floor and read each one. They were pure love letters, innocent, full of promises and dreams. My father wrote about the future he wanted to build with her, about the children they wanted to have, about growing old together. Reading those letters made me cry again, but this time it wasn't just sadness. It was also a sweet melancholy, an appreciation for the love story they had shared, even though it had been interrupted so early. And then I understood something important. My mother had loved twice. She had loved my father with a young and pure love full of possibilities, and she had tried to love again, with hope of finding companionship and comfort in the years she had left. It hadn't been her fault that the second love was a lie. It hadn't been a flaw in her character that she had chosen wrongly. She had done the best she could with the information she had, with the wounded heart she was trying to heal. This understanding gave me a new perspective. It helped me be less harsh with her, less angry about her choices, because in the end she was human. She did the best she could, and she had loved me more than anything in this world. That was unquestionable. Today, more than a year after that day at the temple, I can say it still hurts. My mother's absence isn't something you get over or forget. It's something you learn to carry, like a heavy backpack that eventually your shoulders get used to supporting. But the pain has changed shape. It's no longer that sharp and incapacitating pain of the first months. It's a soft, constant pain, like sad background music that's always playing but which you learn to live despite. When I pass by the temple where everything happened, I still smell chrysanthemums, especially in spring when the flowers are in full bloom in the garden. But now, it's not just the smell of farewell. It's the perfume of remembrance, because even in absence, my mother continues alive in me. I hear her in every difficult decision I make, in every moment when I choose truth instead of convenience, in every time I speak when it would be easier to stay silent. I never had contact with him again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he married that woman 6 months after the funeral, a speed that surprised no one but still managed to scandalize people. Part of me wanted to feel something about it, anger, perhaps, or renewed indignation. But the truth is, I felt nothing. He became irrelevant to my life, a footnote in a story I was rewriting, a secondary character I chose to remove from the narrative. And when I think about him now, I no longer feel hatred. That would be giving him emotional energy he doesn't deserve. Instead, I feel a distant pity. Pity for someone who lives such a small life, so limited by the need to maintain appearances, so dependent on external validation, that he's willing to destroy other people in the process. He lived hiding his face, playing roles, never being truly authentic, while I learned to show my face, even with all the scars, even with all imperfection, even with all vulnerability. And there's a freedom in that which he'll never know. I learned that Korea, this country that can be so cold in winter that your breath freezes in the air, is also a country that welcomes those who decide to start over. The streets of Seoul, which before seemed like a labyrinth with no exit, leading me always back to the same places, same memories, same pains, now lead me to new paths. I discovered hidden cafes I had never been to. I made new friendships with people who didn't know me before, who had no context about my story, and it was liberating to be able to introduce myself as I was now, not as I had been. Each sunset over the Han River reminds me of that promise I made on that cold November day, the promise to never stay silent again. And I've been keeping that promise. At work, when I see something wrong, I speak up. When someone tries to diminish me or disrespect my boundaries, I defend my space. When I feel something isn't right in a relationship or friendship, I address it directly instead of letting resentments accumulate in silence. It's not always easy. Sometimes my voice still shakes when I need to confront something difficult. Sometimes I still feel that old impulse to stay quiet, to not cause problems, to make everything seem fine even when it isn't. But now, I recognize that impulse for what it is, the echo of an upbringing that taught me to place everyone's peace above my own truth, and I gently but firmly refuse that impulse. Today I speak, for myself, for my mother, and for all the women who were silenced in the name of false love, superficial peace, keeping up appearances. I speak because silence kills as surely as any health condition, because swallowing your truths day after day, year after year, eventually poisons you from the inside. I don't want revenge against anyone. Revenge requires you to remain trapped in the past, to spend your precious energy on people who don't deserve a second of your time. Instead, I just want to live so truly, so authentically, so aligned with my values, that the past no longer has power over me, and I'm succeeding. Slowly, one day at a time, I'm succeeding. In Korea, there's a proverb my grandmother used to repeat: winter always holds a spring. When I was a child, I thought it was just about the seasons, but now I understand it's about life. The coldest, darkest, most difficult periods of our existence always contain the seed of something new growing beneath the surface. Pain isn't the end of the story. It's just a chapter, sometimes long and brutal, but still just a chapter. And the silence of loss, that heavy silence that falls over you when someone you love passes, is sometimes the first sound of freedom. Because in the absence of the noise of daily life, you finally manage to hear your own voice. You manage to hear what you really think, what you really feel, what you really want. You manage to hear all the truths you had been muffling. If this story touched you in some way, if at some point in your life you also had to get up after falling, after being knocked down, after believing you couldn't continue, I want you to write in the comments, "I made it," because those 2 words carry so much power. They are a testimony to human resilience, to our incredible capacity to survive the unbearable, to rise again even when the world tries to make us kneel. And if you're still in the middle of your storm, if you're still trying to find strength to take the next step, know that you're not alone. There are millions of us out there, each carrying our own pains, fighting our own battles, learning to live with our own scars. And although sometimes it seems you're completely isolated in your pain, The truth is, we're all connected by our shared humanity, by our universal vulnerability. Deep down, we all want the same thing: to get up, even when we fall, to continue, even when it's difficult, to find meaning, even in pain, to love and be loved, authentically, without masks or lies, and to deserve the life we live, knowing we did the best we could with what we had. And if my voice reached you today, if these words found you at the right moment, I want you to keep this phrase in your heart. Pain didn't kill me, it transformed me. Because that's what pain does, when you allow it. It doesn't have to be just destructive. It can also be transformative. It can break you open so something new can grow. It can burn away everything that's false in you, leaving only what's true and essential. It can teach you about your own strength in ways no comfortable experience ever could. My mother gave me many gifts during her life: love, care, wisdom, laughter, precious memories. But the last gift she gave me, that letter that revealed the truth she carried in silence for so long, may have been the most important of all, because it gave me permission to live authentically. It gave me the understanding that protecting liars isn't kindness, it's complicity. It gave me the courage to choose difficult truth instead of comfortable illusion. And for that, even in the pain of her absence, I'm grateful. Grateful she was my mother. Grateful she loved me enough to give me that final truth. Grateful she believed I would be strong enough to handle it. She was right. I was strong enough, and you're also strong enough for whatever you're facing. Stronger than you imagine, more resilient than you believe, more capable than anyone who tried to diminish you ever made you think. So subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's possible to survive. It's possible to rise again. It's possible to transform pain into strength. And always remember, you are enough, exactly as you are. You don't need anyone's approval. You don't need to make yourself smaller to fit into the space others try to give you. You don't need to carry shames that aren't yours. The greatest proof of love is when you decide to love yourself enough not to accept less than you deserve. And you, my friend who's reading this now, deserve all the good that life can offer. You deserve truth. You deserve respect. You deserve to be chosen. Always. Especially by yourself. Thank you for staying until here. Thank you for hearing my story. And if something here resonated with you, leave a heart in the comments. Because sometimes, sharing pain is the first step to healing. And together, we are stronger than we could be alone.